What is skibbitying my toilets? I wanted to come on here today and respond to an Eigen robot tweet thread. This tweet thread is a theory of what happened during the Great Awakening, which, if you're unaware, the awakening refers to like fourth wave feminism and critical race theory and the awakening of a public environment. I don't know. I'm not here to talk about the Great Awakening. What I am here to talk about is the interpersonal dynamic aspects that I think Eigen was touching on, except I want to kind of reframe them away from male and female or like men and women coded behaviors, because while they are historically and generally coded masculine and feminine or like male and female, I don't. Okay, hot take. First hot take of the video. I don't think that historical organizational methods or historical social patterns are necessarily ultra relevant given our increased technologicalization, right? In the Network State book, Balaji talks about time as like a corkscrew rather than like a pendulum, right? And I know I'm jumping tracks here, but what he basically says is that things that may have worked or not worked in the past may or may not work in the future due to the fact that like we're, you get into a river, you step out, you get in, you never step into the same river twice because you're not the same person, the river's not the same river. You get the idea. Corkscrew means different situations mean different possibilities. But what I wanted to go with here was I think that historically male and female coded behaviors were coded that way because of certain necessities, right? Like if we think of the genetic code, right? Like XX code is stable. It's a stable version. I think I've talked about this in other videos, but if you have your stable code, your push to prod code and your experimental code, you got your XX and your XY, you got your stable code and your experimental code. One of them you want to keep ultra safe, ultra protected. That's going to be your stable code. Now your experimental code, you want the good experiments to work and the bad experiments to fail. So like it makes sense. That's like a dating value thing. That's like an Evo psych, right? But anyways, that's not what I'm here to talk about either. My point is increased technologicalization, increased virtualization. I've been working on this theory called virtualism, I guess. Increased crystallization of virtual objects, virtual schemas, right? It leads to this kind of, instead of male and female, I want to kind of think of it as Singvert and plurvert. Right?
What ranch?
Ma'am, why are you so curious about where I work?
Well, you're applying for the position of livestock agent. Would stand to reason we consider your previous employment while making a decision.
Who's conducting this interview?
I am.
What the hell does a woman know about law enforcement?
Absolutely nothing, but I know men. You see, I can look in a man's eye and know if he can be trusted. You seem to be failing.
My own mama never talked to me like that.
Maybe she should have.
Hey, now, come on, man. I'm afraid you lack the temperament this job requires.
Singular virtual intelligence and plural virtual intelligence, kind of configurations of organisms, right? Like you can have a plural organism or a singular organism. And I'm not talking about like DID or some like woke, mental health. Like, and not that I don't believe in that, but that's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is kind of a superintelligence. Superintelligence meaning like above intelligence, breaking down the word, not meaning like superintelligent computer, meaning like blah, blah, blah. I mean a superintelligence as in above intelligence, as in something that is better than any one intelligence, right? Like one example that I write about a lot and I talk about in my concept of virtualism is the idea of an ant colony, right? Like an individual ant isn't very intelligent, isn't very capable, it can do 10 times its body weight or whatever, but like one ant really isn't that capable or good, right? Like one ant can't really do that much, but a whole ant colony with all the different functions, all the different singular intelligences inside of the plural intelligence, they come together to become a super intelligence that is able to collaborate together to achieve bigger goals, right? And I have this whole framework about how all intelligences work. It's the OSRI, OSRI, right? Anyways, you go to, anyways, not important. We're not getting into that right here. What I'm trying to say is that I think what is deemed as male-coded socialization, or like the man coding, woman coding, this homosocial bonding that it's referring to, is referring to how historically, right, like these were two encodings of the way that social dynamics worked, right? Like if I think about religions and this focus on pairings, right, man and woman, right, I kind of think of specifically in more modern American context, I think of, you know, heterosexual bonding as like this primary focus. And I remember being a child and my mom talking about how like men and women are an ultimate pair, blah blah, God, blah 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 blah. Man and woman is like divine or something, right? The two together create a whole item unit. And this would pair with the idea of somebody getting a Singvert training, right? Like they learn how to function in hierarchy. They learn how to function as an individual. They learn how to function as like somebody, as an experimental version. They function as an experiment rather than as a stable organism, right? Now the other person receives this plural intelligence, this plurvert socialization, this one dedicated to the whole, not the whole species, right? But your sect of the species, your tribe, your city, your country, right? Like your nationality, whatever you identify as, right? You are being given the encodings from your ancestors, your mothers, your grandmothers, grandmothers, blah blah blah. Like you're receiving this historical chain of information, and the guys are too. Don't get me wrong. The difference is the guys teach the guys how to compete in the male, historically, the male homosocial roles, that competition, whereas the women are learning how to survive as a species, not just as individuals. Now what I wanted to kind of touch on with this is that I think with modernity and technological capability, right, and you know, I can't be arsed to look up if it's more common now or not, but I will take the common right-wing claim that more transgenderness is common in the modernity. And we could attribute this to medical factors such as atrazine and microplastics and other PFAs in our water, or in on the farmlands, you know, endocrine disrupting hormones all over our food supplies, all over our packaging, etc. We could blame it on that, but I think there's also some degree of social role or social dynamic at play here, because if we think about many historical societies, a lot of genderqueer what modern people would identify as genderqueer individuals were seen as like religious or spiritual leaders, right? And I think it's kind of this idea of receiving the training for one, right, and then like receiving the training for the other, because I think that's what a lot of people talk about when they talk about how like they're unable to see the insides of the feminine homosocial demi-religion, right? Like Eigenrobot is not able to see inside of the encoded dynamics at play there, because these are not the kind of dynamics that they interface with, right? But it's not that they are unable to interface with plur dynamics, right? They mostly interface with Sing dynamics, but can't interface with plur dynamics, and I don't think that's true. I think historically speaking, the elites are given training to both men and women are kind of given training to individual Sing development, as well as this idea of like plur development. And there's somebody in my Discord server that likes to talk about elite theory, right? And I'm not sure if them and I would agree on what elite theory is, but I do like this idea of elite theory of socialization, right? And I think that what most people consider male socialization, when they're thinking of it in a positive way, they're thinking of it as elite male socialization, or just elite socialization. And when they're thinking of it in a negative way, they're thinking of only that that Singvert socialization that I mentioned earlier, where they're only learning how to be an experiment rather than leading how to run a country or run a family or run a household.
What the fuck, Gord? Bitcoin mining in your dorm?
Multi-mining.
What the fuck is a multi? Mining a selection of cryptocurrencies with the highest market prices and trading them back for Bitcoin is the smart way to do the stupid thing he was doing.
But it was going to work, and it should have worked if the wiring in the dorm wasn't so shit.
You're blaming that?
Well, that's why we bypassed the internal fusing.
Give us a call when you quit college. We'll have a job for you.
Your son was responsible for the cascading failure of the local grid, knocked out the town.
Showed initiative. Our business leaders today, they started young.
It showed Mr. Axelrod a complete lack of respect for the codes and morals that we've been instilling in our young men and more recently women for generations. And more than that, it's a true lack of character.
Dad, I'm really sorry.
I'm not mad that you ran a scheme. I'm mad you didn't game it out. The risk-reward ratio is off. Second law of thermodynamics, Gordy.
Total entropy of a system.
No, the price of your actions. Now we have to ruin a headmaster. A good man.
What makes me think of this is that there's this article I read once, or it's not, I don't know if it was an article. It was just like a paper or something. It was called the Gervais principle, and it was this idea of how there's your elite class, there's your managerial class, and there's your loser class, right? And it talks about how the elite class, that he calls them the sociopaths. Sociopaths are focused on ideas of running the intelligence. And when I think of the word sociopath, you know, similar to how Eigen changed the framing of patriarch from the order by men to like the order of men, like the male religion, right? A sociopath, a lot of people view it as this kind of like ultra chaotic and disruptive individual, right? Which, if you look at it from a plur view, that kind of makes sense, right? A sociopath, somebody that is able to see the rules of society and like play around them or like adapt them to their own liking, is a negative thing if you are focused on the idea of a plur, right? And a fun fact about sociopaths is it's a 3-to-1 ratio, men to women, sociopath ratio, which I just found funny. I found that a little interesting, and it kind of, I'm not going to say it appeals to my theory, but I did throw it in the video for a reason. That's not what I'm going to. I wanted to get into something else. Oh, sociopath. Pathy can refer to like the practice of, right? So sociopathy kind of makes me think of like the practice of people, the practice of social interaction, right? So like, I think it's only deemed sociopathy if it's negative, the same way people only pull out male socialization in the negative way, not in the idea of like, you have been trained to be ultra responsible for the entire world, and you're given a lot of responsibility, like a carrot and a stick, right? No, a lot of people are given the carrot and they're pissed off because they still want to wield the stick. A lot of people are given the stick and then they're like, I didn't even get a freaking carrot. And then the people with the stick and the carrot, they're just running the world. They're too busy to participate in any of these discussions. So, I don't know. Anyways, my point was, where was I trying to go with this? Yeah, I don't know. I guess another thing that kind of aligns with this is the idea that like, language is just encoded data, right? Like the Bible or like any religious text, for example, is just encoding the wisdom of the people that wrote it. And even like mouth to mouth or like oral lore, oral myth, oral stories are like encodings of data. You know, ancient Greek myth, it's not literally Sky Daddy, just like the Bible isn't literally Sky Daddy. It's like morals. Like, this is how you should act. Be like Zeus, be like Hades, be like Poseidon. I don't know. Maybe don't be like any of them. I don't remember enough to know if you want to be like any of them. But in theory, you might want to be like some of them. And do you know how you know what they're like? Through the stories and the myths that you've been given, which is encoded like ideas of how you interpret the world. Anyways. So like, I think that, yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's all I have to say. That might be all I have to say on this one. I think I did want to respond a little bit to Goblin Nods as well, though. Goblin Nods was talking about how Killing Eve, I've never seen it, but they said Killing Eve is great because it's a psychological exploration of what happens when you eviscerate patriarchy without knowing what that means. Even feminists don't want the sweet, neutered feminist man they constructed. They want someone powerful. The thread does go on, but basically, the thread continues to talk about how the patriarch is kind of the one that takes the responsibility. They're the one that is like responsible, right? And like, I think this idea I think that what most people blame on fourth wave feminism, right? Because there's kind of these two sides. You have the plur-coded people who want to be able to be validated as sings, as individuals, as people, not just as that plur runner. Generally, historically speaking, the women, they are like, I don't like my role in life. I want to be a person like you're a person. I don't want to be stuck running the house. I don't want to be stuck here. Because if you're not an elite woman, it really sucked, right? Like I think I was reading something about how, like, historically speaking, nobody's really fighting for rights until they start taking them from the upper class or middle class. Like, nobody cares if the bottom people are getting stomped on in your society, if like most of your society doesn't have that. Anyways, my point why I mentioned that is that, like, a lot of plur socialized people were very upset with not being sings. Then, right, sings are very upset with the fact that they are now struggling in a plur-coded world, right? I think, I don't remember where it was, but somewhere, either in this thread or the other thread, it was talking about how in ancient Rome, towards, I think it was the 2nd BCE. Wait, BCE is like a long time before Rome fell, and they were trying to. That's like 600. Wait a minute. I think I'm misspeaking somewhere because that could not be accurate. Whatever. It's not here, but I think the general idea was that, like, this web of men kind of creates the scaffolding of experimental society, and then the Sing socialization, the Singvert socialization, encourages experimentation in society. It encourages experiments. It encourages for you to thrive or for you to die, quite literally, right? And I think that by creating that kind of scaffolding through experimentation, the plur socialized individuals are able to kind of fill in what they deem logical. So it's like these like conflicting needs, because technically the singverts are also part of the plurvert, but they're focusing on like singverts. They're not focusing on the plur, right? Like I think that's the biggest thing, is that while there's still an aspect of the plur, they're not the plur and they're not focused on the plur, right? Like the individual ants aren't focused on the overarching patterns that be. They're looking for food, they're following pheromone trails, and they're dropping their own pheromone trails, right? Or if they're the fighter ant, they're fighting. Or if they're the queen, they're having babies. Or if they're a male and a female, and they're like first flight, whatever, where they still have their wings, nuptial flight, then like that's that, right? My point is that, like, once you enter this plural intelligence, a lot of things happen above the view, right? And like, if we think about this, mothers thinking of their children, like that's kind of the archetype in somebody's head, is like mothers caring for their children, women caring for their children. I know that's historical, I know that's sexist, if you want to call it sexist, I know that's traditional, but generally that's what people think of. And then people also generally can think of, you know, if you're gonna have deadbeat mom or deadbeat dad, you know, which one is it probably gonna be? It's probably gonna be a deadbeat dad. I'm just saying, that's more likely. Historically, that's what you think of. And also think about the fact that there's a ton of dads that are just dead all the time because they go off to war and then they die, because we see them as experimental versions. So obviously that's the way society thinks about it too. But then again, never mind, I'm not gonna go into that argument. But I think it's this idea of like creating the scaffolding for the plur, and then the plur fills it in, right? So like ultimately it's all part of the same gig. But I guess to reach back to what I was saying earlier, like way earlier, is that I think the more that we have technological access, and the more that singvertism isn't a smart idea. Not that it isn't a smart idea, but in physical territory, right? You need brawn and strength to really, you know, conquer that land, if you know what I mean. And then the same is not true in virtual space. In virtual space, You know, again, I write about this at length, but in physical space, things are binary. Things are true or not true. Things are there or not there. Things are 0 or 1. In virtual space, things are a gradient. Things are varieties of there and not there at the same time, right? Things are not binary. Well, they're freaking percentile times percentile times percentile, on and on and on and on and on. They're just so probabilistic, right? And it really means that as we need less strong men, we will need more socially adaptive, I don't want to say manipulative, socially capable, socially aware, plurvert trained individuals, right? Both men and women. And, you know, I think I was reading something about how, like, ancient Romans were talking crap and like they blamed the fall of Rome. Again, I don't know if that's true because I think the timing doesn't really make sense, but they blamed that on like the increased virtualization. They call it bureaucracy, they call it government, they call it like manageriality, right? But it's increased virtualization of society, increased, you know, the crystallized virtual. But yeah, that's kind of what I was saying. Oh, yes. As we have more and more and more, we don't need the two encodings that we used to have. Why would you need a man and a woman for one divine being, which historically was accurate when you need like physical strength and virtual capability and capacity, right? When you need all of these things, you need man and woman. And I'm not saying that like we should all just be autonomous individuals, right? Where we are, well, I think all of us should be autonomous, but I don't think all of us should be individual Singverts, right? Like that's not what I'm saying. And in fact, I'm actually saying the opposite. I think the era of Singverts, the era of like the prioritization of Singverts, this idea of great men isn't really the case anymore. And you know, there's that like great men, the like waves of history thing, right? That would be like a plurvert argument. I think it is like a both. It's like a great men riding the waves of history kind of thing, which means you need to know how to interact both as a Singvert and as a plurvert, which is also, this ties into why I think so many women are finding success today and so many men are failing. Men aren't trained, right? Regular men aren't trained. Again, elite men, elite women are both getting both trainings for individual and plural management. The vast majority of men have been trained how to be Singverts. Their fathers, the experiments that succeeded, the winning experiments, if they even give them encodings, right? If they encoded any data and like investment into their child, it's going to be outdated advice, right? You think of your grandparents telling you, walk in there and give them an application, right? Like, it doesn't work anymore. This encoded data, with how fast data is changing, how fast technology is changing the landscape, the information landscape, the information environment. These old data encodings, these old stories, like we call them stories, they're language, they're text, but they're more than text. They're encoded lore, they're encoded themes and like a logic and like myth for us to framework life with. These old frameworks are outdated. Anyways, I guess all this is to say that like I think really what people are, oh my, this is not where I thought this was going, but when people are arguing for the abolition of gender, I think they're arguing for the increased capacity of all individuals for both Singvert and plurvert operability, right? Because moving forward, I think being able to interface in groups, being able to interface on networks, in the web, in the nets, right, is going to be vital. And I think that is also why we've seen so many autistic people transition, but also be so internet based, right? It's these places where you're able to kind of explore the deeper connections that be. And I'm not saying that they are realizing that they're learning how to operate in the plur, but the internet is like this shared virtual connection, which is a plur, right? It is a plurvert. And like, anyways, I'm not gonna go on and on and on, because I'm sure I'm sure nobody's even listening at this point, because they're like, what is this schizo doing? But I'm not even schizophrenic, I promise. I think. I want to say that is all, and I'm gonna edit this, so if it really is all, I probably cut it like a couple minutes ago. I just want to make sure I get everything out. Oh, this ties to something. Okay. So as I mentioned, I have been building this thing called virtualism, right? And it's this idea of like singverts, plurverts, Osri, like, I'm developing a whole framework of viewing the new way of interacting with the world and with the frameworks that life is building, right? And I came across this post on Twitter, and it was somebody roasting U of A, U of ATX, but U of ATX posted, and they said Antichrist, Empire, Tolstoy, Mars, Watchmen, Armageddon, One Piece, Elon, Katachan, Greta, Concord, Rumors, Babel, Oppenheimer, Benedict Option, Printing Press, Egregore, Acceleration. I think I probably think of a lot of these terms very differently than somebody like Peter Thiel or Elon Musk or these other elite men that have received elite training, right? Because again, the elite men are given both Singvert and plurvert training. But in my own development of virtualism, I have stumbled on and like found my way looking at a lot of these same concepts in different views, right? And like I think one thing that is important to kind of discern here is that the elite men that are doing this, their encodings are how to stay elite, right? Like their elite parents and likely their elite grandparents have taught them how to be an elite person, have taught them how to operate as an elite. And again, language, stories, these are all encodings on how we framework the world. So I guess what I'm saying is that I think that the kind of plurvert that they're building, the kind of future that they're suggesting, the kind of interactions that they're referencing are going to be extremely vertical hierarchy based, which I'm not a dissident against hierarchy. Like I'm pragmatic with the way that human social structure works, right? The way that human brains kind of inherently process data, right? Like I understand that even if the hierarchies are not the same as they are now, various hierarchies of various kinds will always exist, even if they're implicit rather than explicit, even if they're invisible rather than visible. That's what I just said in different words. But I think that it's important for us as like a decentralized population, as a decentralized mass, as a decentralized plurvert, as budding plurverts, as educated singverts. And that's the other thing. It's not that like that's the other thing. People can't be plurverts. They can only kind of like shepherd them or like encourage them or like boss them. Like you can influence a plurvert, but you are not the plurvert. And I think that's what like a lot of leaders who get into leadership positions kind of see themselves as, is like you are me rather than like I am you. And it's kind of that like idea of patriarchy that Eigen was talking about, the first way versus the second way, being like I rule you versus like you rule how I live, or like you rule me in a way, right? Like rule by fathers versus the rule of the fathers. Yeah. Okay. So I just wanted to say all that to say that I've been a little skeptical about this idea of virtualism, but the more I interface with the world and the more things I read and the more like I flesh out this framework, the more I realize that it's extremely useful in like understanding these kinds of interpersonal dynamics and the underlying arguments that are actually being had by various institutional groups, right? Like most of the like, I'll just say you can tell when somebody's fighting for their singvert versus when they're fighting for a larger plurvert. And that's what I'll leave you with. So drop it in the comments down below if you watched to the end, if you have any thoughts, if you like it, if you dislike it, if you thought it was good, if you thought it was bad, if you thought it was rad, if you thought it was sad. Let me know. Let me know. Where's my dad? Okay, bye. I love you.